Fire, stop scrolling. What happens when a Wall Street prince cuts off the wrong woman for a year, thinking she'll disappear, only to wake up and discover she now owns his company's debt? This story will shatter everything you think you know about power, revenge, and who really controls the money in America. The financial chess move she pulls off is so brilliant that even seasoned Wall Street veterans are calling it legendary. Backhand index pointing up, hit subscribe and the bell icon because stories like this don't come around often, and you'll want to catch every strategic move she makes to turn the tables completely. The Midtown Manhattan rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Whitfield Capital Management as Elena Vasquez fine-tuned her third financial model of the morning. Her corner desk, earned through 18-hour days and a track record that made senior partners nervous, overlooked the urban canyon where billions moved with digital keystrokes. Elena. Marcus Whitfield III's voice carried that particular blend of privilege and dismissal she'd grown to recognize. Conference room. Now. She saved her work on the Henderson Industries deal, a complex debt restructuring she'd been architecting for weeks, and followed him past the marble reception area where his family's portrait dominated the wall. 3 generations of Whitfields, all bearing the same entitled smirk. The conference room felt arctic. Marcus stood with his back to her, hands clasped behind his tailored suit jacket, staring out at the city his family had helped shape for 60 years. "I've been thinking about us," he began, still facing the window. "This arrangement we have." Elena's chest tightened. They'd been together 8 months, long enough for her to meet his parents at their Hamptons estate, long enough to hear whispered speculation about engagement rings. "Marcus, if this is about the other night, it's not about one night." He turned, and she saw a stranger wearing her boyfriend's face. Cold. Clinical. It's about fit. Social compatibility. Long-term strategic alignment. The corporate jargon hit like a slap. Strategic alignment? You're brilliant, Elena. Nobody questions that. But this world, he gestured toward the windows, toward the exclusive restaurants and charity galas that comprise their social ecosystem, requires more than intelligence. More than intelligence? Her voice stayed level despite the ground shifting beneath her. Pedigree. The right schools, the right family connections. Clients need to see continuity, tradition. They need to trust that their wealth is being managed by people who understand their perspective. Elena's hands found the edge of the mahogany conference table. My perspective managed to secure 3 major accounts this quarter. Which is exactly why this conversation is so difficult. Marcus's tone carried the practiced regret of someone delivering bad news to shareholders. You're valuable to the firm. Irreplaceable, even. But personally, I need someone who can navigate Aspen dinner parties without researching topics beforehand. Someone who knows which fork to use instinctively. The words landed with surgical precision. Elena thought of her mother, who'd cleaned offices at night to pay for Elena's economics textbooks. Of her father, who'd driven Uber between construction jobs to afford her business school applications. You're breaking up with me because I'm not rich enough. I'm being realistic about our futures. Marcus moved toward the door. You'll understand someday. Business is about relationships, Elena. And some relationships don't scale. He paused at the threshold. Take the afternoon off. Clear your head. We'll maintain professional decorum, of course. Elena remained seated long after his footsteps faded down the hallway. Through the conference room's glass walls, she watched junior analysts scurry between offices like ants in a designer colony. None of them looked up. None of them had heard the conversation that just redefined her entire reality. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, left something for you at your desk. Consider it a parting gesture of appreciation. She returned to find a Tiffany box containing diamond earrings, beautiful, expensive, and utterly impersonal. The accompanying card read, "For services rendered." Elena stared at the jewelry for 30 seconds, then quietly slipped it into her desk drawer. Around her, the office hummed with its usual energy, completely oblivious to the fact that she'd just been dismissed from the inner circle like a contractor whose project had ended. She opened her laptop and resumed work on the Henderson Industries deal, her fingers moving across the keyboard with mechanical precision. Numbers didn't lie. Financial models didn't care about her zip code or her parents' occupations. But as she worked, a different kind of calculation began forming in the back of her mind. Not about Henderson Industries' debt structure, about Whitfield Capital's exposure, about leverage ratios and credit dependencies she'd studied but never considered from this angle. Marcus was right about one thing. Business was about relationships. He'd just ended the wrong one. Elena's morning routine hadn't changed in 3 weeks. Arrive at 6 a.m., coffee from the bodega downstairs, review overnight market movements before the office filled with voices. What had changed was the careful choreography everyone performed around her and Marcus. Colleagues who once included her in lunch invitations now offered polite smiles and urgent excuses. The Thursday morning strategy meetings she'd dominated for months suddenly had limited seating. Even the elevator conversations died when she stepped inside. Elena. David Chen, the managing partner, appeared at her cubicle with the expression of a man about to deliver quarterly earnings disappointment. "My office." She followed him past Marcus's corner office, where she could see him gesturing animatedly to 2 older men in identical navy suits, potential clients, judging by their expensive watches and uncomfortable postures. David closed his door and settled behind his desk with audible reluctance. "You know I've always valued your contributions." The past tense hit immediately. "Your work on the Henderson restructuring was exceptional. Truly. But—" David's fingers drummed against his leather desk pad. "The firm is evolving. We're focusing more on relationship management, client cultivation. Less on pure analysis." Elena's throat felt lined with cotton. "I brought in 3 major accounts this quarter. Which is why this is so difficult." David opened a folder she hadn't noticed him carrying. "We're offering a generous severance package. 6 months' salary, full benefits continuation, and glowing recommendations for any position you pursue." The documents materialized in front of her like court papers. Non-compete clause. Confidentiality agreement. 30 days to clean out her desk. "This is Marcus's decision, isn't it?" David's silence confirmed everything. "The Henderson deal closes next week. I've spent 4 months. Will be handled by our senior team." David's voice carried finality. "Marcus will personally oversee the transition." Elena scanned the severance agreement, her mind automatically calculating the financial implications while her heart processed the betrayal. 6 months' salary sounded generous until she considered Manhattan rent, business school loans, and the cost of rebuilding a career that had just been amputated. "I need time to review this." "Of course. Take until Monday." David stood, signaling the meeting's end. "Elena, you're incredibly talented. This isn't about capability." She gathered the documents and walked back to her desk through a gauntlet of averted eyes and sudden phone conversations. Her computer screen still displayed the Henderson Industries financial model, months of work that would bear someone else's signature by Tuesday. At lunch, Elena sat alone in Bryant Park, eating a sandwich while reviewing the severance terms. The non-compete clause was particularly thorough. No employment with competing firms for 18 months, no client contact, no utilization of proprietary methodologies. Marcus had effectively exiled her from Wall Street. Her phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. Someone had viewed her profile, probably David's assistant, updating her status to former analyst in preparation for Monday's announcement. Elena opened her banking app, calculating how long 6 months' severance would last in a city that devoured money like oxygen. The math was unforgiving but not desperate. She'd survived worse odds. As she walked back to the office, Elena passed a newsstand displaying the afternoon financial papers. Henderson Industries' logo dominated the business section, speculation about their upcoming debt restructuring creating minor market ripples. She'd architected that deal from the ground up, identified the optimal structure that would save Henderson millions while generating substantial fees for Whitfield Capital. By next week, Marcus would present her work to clients as his own strategic vision. Elena purchased the newspaper and tucked it under her arm. Not for nostalgia, for reference. That evening, in her studio apartment overlooking a courtyard instead of Manhattan skyline, Elena spread the Henderson Industries documents across her kitchen table alongside her laptop and the severance agreement. Her mother had always said the best time to plan was when your back was against the wall, when desperation sharpened focus into precision. She began researching something she'd never needed to understand before: how to start an independent financial consulting practice. The initial investment requirements. The regulatory hurdles. The client acquisition strategies that didn't violate non-compete clauses. 3 hours later, Elena closed her laptop with a different kind of satisfaction than she'd felt in weeks. Not the satisfaction of solving someone else's problems, the satisfaction of identifying her own opportunities. Marcus thought he'd eliminated a threat. He'd actually eliminated his only protection. 6 months into unemployment, Elena had transformed her studio apartment into a financial war room. 2 additional monitors flanked her laptop, displaying real-time market data, credit reports, and corporate filings. The kitchen table had disappeared beneath stacks of regulatory documents, business plans, and legal textbooks ordered from Amazon with her dwindling savings. Her morning routine now began at 5 a.m. with international market reviews, continued through SEC filing analysis, and concluded with evening calls to former business school classmates scattered across Chicago, Boston, and Los Angeles, the few connections that predated her Whitfield Capital exile. Elena, you're overqualified for entry-level positions and underconnected for senior roles. Jennifer Martinez, her former Columbia study partner, delivered the assessment over FaceTime from her Denver investment office. It's harsh but honest. Marcus poisoned the well pretty thoroughly. Elena adjusted her laptop angle to hide the financial chaos behind her. What about independent consulting? With what client base? The non-compete kills your Wall Street contacts, and corporate debt restructuring isn't exactly small business territory. Jennifer paused, her expression softening. Have you considered relocating? Seattle's venture capital scene is exploding, or maybe Austin. I'm staying in New York. After the call ended, Elena returned to her current project, a comprehensive analysis of distressed debt markets that she'd been developing for 3 months. Not for any client, for education. Each morning, she identified companies approaching financial difficulty, then spent her days modeling potential restructuring scenarios. The work served multiple purposes. It kept her analytical skills sharp, it provided material for the financial blog she'd started under a pseudonym, and it revealed patterns that formal employment had never allowed her to explore. Companies like Meridian Logistics, struggling with post-pandemic supply chain costs. Sterling Manufacturing, hemorrhaging cash due to increased materials expenses. Apex Retail, drowning in commercial real estate commitments that no longer matched consumer behavior. All distressed. All desperate. All invisible to major investment firms focused on Fortune 500 clients. Elena's blog, Distressed Dynamics, had attracted a modest but engaged readership among bankruptcy attorneys, turnaround specialists, and investors seeking opportunities in corporate wreckage. Her anonymity allowed candor that employed analysts couldn't afford. Detailed critiques of failed restructuring strategies, predictions about which companies wouldn't survive the next recession, and occasionally, strategic recommendations that proved remarkably accurate. One evening in November, Elena received an encrypted message through the blog's contact form. Your analysis of the Meridian Logistics situation was prescient. Our firm executed a similar strategy and achieved results consistent with your projections. Are you available for consultation? Discretion assured. K.R. Elena stared at the message for 20 minutes before responding. Her first potential client in 8 months, reaching out through a blog they couldn't connect to her identity. The consultation led to a project. The project led to a retainer. KR turned out to represent a family investment office managing generational wealth for clients who valued results over relationships. They didn't care about Elena's Ivy League credentials. They cared about her ability to identify undervalued assets in distressed situations. By December, Elena was managing 6 active projects, operating under her LLC designation and maintaining strict anonymity protocols. Her clients knew her as Elena Vasquez Consulting and communicated exclusively through encrypted channels. They paid consulting fees that exceeded her former Whitfield salary, primarily because her recommendations generated returns that justified premium pricing. One project particularly captured her attention: a comprehensive analysis of mid-tier investment firms that had overextended during the recent bull market. Companies that looked stable on quarterly reports but carried dangerous leverage ratios and client concentration risks. Companies like Whitfield Capital Management. Elena spent weeks dissecting Whitfield's public filings, cross-referencing client relationships with market dependencies, mapping their exposure to various economic scenarios. What she discovered made her hands tremble as she typed her analysis. Whitfield wasn't just vulnerable. They were catastrophically exposed to a specific type of market disruption. Their entire business model depended on maintaining relationships with 3 major pension funds whose investment committees were growing increasingly concerned about fee structures and performance metrics. If those relationships fractured, Whitfield's debt obligations would become unsustainable within 18 months. Elena saved the analysis to an encrypted drive and leaned back in her desk chair, watching snow fall past her single window. Somewhere across the city, Marcus was probably attending a holiday party, networking with the social connections that had made him untouchable. He had no idea that his former girlfriend had just identified the exact pressure point that could collapse his family's 60-year legacy. Elena closed her laptop and walked to her bathroom mirror, studying the reflection of someone she barely recognized. Leaner from months of economic stress, sharper from intellectual hunger that employment had never satisfied, and behind her eyes, something new. Not revenge, patience. The kind of patience that turned market analysis into strategic advantage. Her phone buzzed with another encrypted message. Elena Vasquez, your Q4 report exceeded expectations. We're prepared to discuss expanded engagement for 2024. Are you interested in more complex acquisition scenarios? Kr. Elena smiled at her reflection. She was very interested in acquisition scenarios, particularly ones involving distressed investment firms. 18 months after her termination, Elena had evolved from unemployed analyst to invisible powerbroker. Her client network spanned 12 states, her encrypted consultation fees had purchased a proper apartment in Brooklyn Heights, and her anonymous reputation had attracted attention from institutional investors who specialized in opportunities that traditional firms overlooked. The transformation accelerated when KR revealed their full identity. Catherine Richardson, managing partner of Richardson Strategic Holdings, a $2.8 billion fund that acquired undervalued companies and repositioned them for explosive growth. Catherine had built her fortune by identifying market inefficiencies that others missed, exactly the skill that Elena's anonymous blog had demonstrated consistently. Your Whitfield capital analysis is remarkable, Catherine said during their first in-person meeting at a private club in Manhattan. She was 60, impeccably dressed, and radiated the confidence of someone who'd survived 4 decades in male-dominated finance. Particularly your insights about their pension fund dependencies. Elena maintained carefully neutral expression despite her racing pulse. She'd submitted the Whitfield analysis as a theoretical case study, not revealing her personal connection to the firm. They're over-leveraged and underprotected, Elena replied. Classic case of relationship-dependent revenue without operational diversity. Catherine smiled. Which makes them an interesting acquisition target for the right buyer. The conversation that followed changed everything Elena understood about power in financial markets. Catherine didn't just manage money, She orchestrated corporate transformations that redefined entire industries. Her fund had acquired 17 companies in 5 years, each purchase representing opportunities that established firms had dismissed as too complex or too risky. "I have a proposition," Catherine continued. "Richardson Strategic is launching a new division focused on financial services acquisitions. We need someone who understands both traditional investment structures and distressed market dynamics. Someone who can identify vulnerable firms before they realize their own exposure." Elena absorbed the implications. "You're talking about hostile acquisitions of investment companies." "I'm talking about strategic acquisitions of underperforming firms that could benefit from new management and operational restructuring." Catherine's tone carried the precision of someone accustomed to regulatory scrutiny. Perfectly legal, highly profitable, and occasionally, personally satisfying. The position offered everything Elena had lost: significant compensation, strategic influence, and access to capital markets at the highest levels. But it also offered something she'd never possessed: the power to reshape the industry that had dismissed her. Elena accepted immediately. Her first assignment involved 6 months of intensive research, identifying mid-tier investment firms with structural vulnerabilities that could be exploited through strategic debt acquisition. Elena approached the work with methodical precision, analyzing hundreds of companies while mapping their financial dependencies and relationship networks. The research confirmed her initial assessment: Whitfield Capital was uniquely vulnerable. Their primary weakness centered on a $47 million credit facility secured through Manhattan Trust Bank, used to finance their office lease, operational expenses, and client acquisition costs. The debt carried variable interest rates tied to prime lending indicators and required quarterly covenant compliance regarding client asset levels and fee generation. More critically, the debt included acceleration clauses that would trigger immediate full payment if ownership of the debt transferred to entities deemed hostile to Whitfield's business interests. Elena spent 3 weeks crafting an acquisition strategy that was both legal and devastating. Richardson Strategic would establish a subsidiary shell company, acquire Whitfield's debt through third-party intermediaries, then exercise creditor rights to force operational changes or demand immediate repayment. "Elegant," Catherine commented after reviewing Elena's proposal. "How long before they realize what's happening?" The debt acquisition could be completed overnight through electronic transfer. They wouldn't know until they received formal notification of creditor change. Catherine approved the strategy with one modification: Elena would personally oversee the acquisition and subsequent negotiations with Whitfield's management team. The purchase took place on a Thursday in March. Elena sat in Richardson Strategic's conference room, watching her laptop screen as $47 million moved through electronic banking channels, transforming her from former employee to primary creditor in 17 minutes. At 9:47 a.m., Elena became the person who controlled Marcus Whitfield's professional survival. At 9:48 a.m., she instructed Richardson's legal team to prepare creditor notification documents for immediate delivery. At 9:49 a.m., Elena experienced a satisfaction more intense than any salary bonus or performance review had ever provided. Her phone buzzed with a text message: "Debt acquisition complete. Target notification scheduled for 2 p.m. delivery. Congratulations on your first strategic victory. K.R." Elena closed her laptop and walked to the conference room windows overlooking Manhattan's financial district. Somewhere in those glass towers, Marcus was probably reviewing client portfolios or attending partnership meetings, completely unaware that his company's future now depended on the mercy of the woman he'd dismissed for lacking the right pedigree. She'd spent 22 months learning lessons they didn't teach in business school: how to survive professional execution, how to rebuild from financial exile, and how to transform humiliation into leverage. By 2 p.m., Marcus would receive documentation proving that Elena Vasquez, the woman who wasn't socially compatible with his strategic future, now owned his company's debt. Elena smiled at her reflection in the conference room windows. Some relationships definitely didn't scale, but some scaled in directions that nobody anticipated. The Whitfield Capital Management conference room felt smaller than Elena remembered as she settled into the leather chair directly across from Marcus. 2 years had sharpened her features and straightened her posture, while stress had added gray threads to Marcus's perfectly styled hair and deepened the lines around his eyes. David Chen sat beside Marcus, flanked by 2 attorneys whose hourly rates probably exceeded Elena's former monthly salary. Catherine Richardson occupied the chair to Elena's right, radiating the calm confidence of someone who'd orchestrated dozens of similar conversations. "Let's review the situation," Catherine began, placing a leather portfolio on the mahogany table. "Richardson Strategic Holdings now owns Whitfield Capital's primary debt obligation through legitimate secondary market acquisition. Total amount, $47 million, plus accrued interest and penalties. Current status, 90 days past due on covenant compliance." Marcus's jaw tightened. "This is a hostile takeover disguised as debt collection." "This is standard creditor rights enforcement," Elena replied, her voice carrying none of the uncertainty Marcus remembered. "Your firm failed to maintain required client asset levels. The debt is in technical default." She opened her own portfolio, revealing documents that made David Chen visibly pale. "Quarterly reports show consistent client losses for 18 months. Henderson Industries terminated their relationship after discovering your team's incomplete understanding of their restructuring requirements." The mention of Henderson Industries, Elena's original deal, hung in the room like revealed evidence. "What do you want?" Marcus asked, directing the question to Catherine while avoiding Elena's gaze. "We want Whitfield Capital to succeed under new management structure," Catherine replied. "Richardson Strategic specializes in operational turnarounds for underperforming firms. We're prepared to forgive the debt default and provide additional growth capital in exchange for majority ownership and management control." Marcus leaned forward. "You want us to sell our family business." "We want you to save your family business," Elena corrected. "Current trajectory leads to bankruptcy within 8 months. We've modeled every scenario." She distributed copies of her analysis, the same type of financial modeling that had once impressed Whitfield's clients, now deployed to dissect the firm's approaching collapse. "Your pension fund relationships are deteriorating due to fee pressure and performance concerns. Sterling Manufacturing dropped you last quarter. Apex Retail is reviewing alternatives. Without those anchor clients, your debt service becomes unsustainable." David Chen studied the projections with growing alarm. "These numbers, how did you obtain this information?" "Public filings, SEC reports, and industry analysis," Elena replied. "The same research techniques I used when I worked here. Apparently my analytical capabilities improved after leaving your employ." Catherine smoothly transitioned to the formal proposal. "Richardson Strategic offers 2 options. Option 1. We accelerate the debt, demand immediate payment, and file foreclosure proceedings. Timeline: Whitfield Capital ceases operations within 60 days. The attorneys began scribbling notes frantically. Option 2. We restructure the debt as equity exchange, maintain the Whitfield brand, and provide growth capital for expansion. Marcus remains as managing director under new operational oversight." Marcus finally looked directly at Elena. "And you? What's your role in this restructuring?" "Senior Vice President of Strategic Development," Elena replied. "Overseeing client relationships and institutional development." The irony wasn't subtle. Elena would now supervise the relationship management that Marcus had claimed required proper breeding and social connections. "This is revenge," Marcus said quietly. "This is business," Elena replied. "The same business principles you explained to me in this conference room 2 years ago. Strategic alignment, long-term compatibility, and operational efficiency." Catherine interjected before Marcus could respond. "The offer expires at close of business today. Option 1 or Option 2. Your choice." Elena watched Marcus process the implications. His family's 60-year legacy balanced against his personal pride, measured in financial terms he couldn't manipulate or negotiate. David Chen broke the silence. "We need time to review the proposal with our board." "You have until 6 p.m., Catherine stated. "Elena has prepared detailed transition plans for either scenario." As the meeting concluded, Elena gathered her documents with deliberate calm. She'd imagined this moment countless times during 18 months of reconstruction, but the reality felt different than her fantasies. Not triumphant, professional. Not personal, strategic. Marcus approached as the others filed out. "Elena." A word. She waited, noting how he positioned himself between her and the window, the same spot where he'd delivered her termination notice. "You orchestrated this entire situation," he said. "The debt acquisition, the client losses, everything." "I identified an opportunity," Elena replied. "The same way you identified an opportunity to remove me from this firm. Market forces, Marcus. Supply and demand. And if I choose option 1? If I let the company collapse rather than accept your oversight?" Elena considered the question seriously. "Then you'll prove that pride matters more than preservation. Your employees will find other positions, your clients will transfer to competitors, and your family's legacy will end because you couldn't adapt to new leadership requirements." She moved toward the door, then paused. "You taught me that business is about relationships, Marcus. You just never considered that I might develop better relationships than yours." That evening, Elena sat in her Brooklyn Heights apartment, watching Manhattan's lights reflect off the East River. Her phone showed 6 missed calls from Whitfield's attorneys and 2 text messages from Catherine. At 5:47 p.m., David Chen's email arrived. "Elena, Whitfield Capital Management accepts option 2. We look forward to working with Richardson Strategic Holdings on our operational restructuring. Please forward transition documentation." Elena poured a glass of wine and opened her laptop to review the integration timeline she'd prepared months ago. By next week, she'd occupy the corner office that had once symbolized everything she couldn't achieve. But the satisfaction felt different than she'd expected. Not the completion of revenge, the beginning of responsibility. Whitfield Capital employed 43 people whose careers now depended on her ability to transform the firm's strategy and culture. Elena raised her wine glass toward the Manhattan skyline. Tomorrow, she'd begin rebuilding the company that had discarded her, using the analytical skills that had never needed pedigree or social connections. Only precision, persistence, and the kind of patience that turned market analysis into strategic victory. Some relationships definitely didn't scale. Others transformed into something nobody could have predicted. 5 years later, Elena stood in the renovated conference room of Whitfield Richardson Strategic, watching her latest analyst present a complex debt restructuring proposal to clients from 3 continents. The mahogany table remained, but everything else had transformed. Digital screens replaced oil paintings, diverse voices replaced old boy networks, and merit replaced pedigree as the firm's primary currency. The morning's Financial Times lay open beside her coffee cup, featuring a cover story titled "The Vasquez Effect: How One Woman Redefined Wall Street Success." The accompanying photograph showed Elena at her desk, surrounded by awards from industry associations that had once excluded her from membership consideration. Marcus appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand, wearing the expression of someone delivering quarterly results that exceeded expectations. "Henderson Industries just renewed for another 3 years," he reported. They specifically requested Elena's personal oversight for their expansion financing. Elena smiled. Henderson Industries had returned as a client 18 months ago, after their new CEO researched which firm had actually designed their successful restructuring strategy. The irony wasn't lost on anyone involved. And the Singapore expansion? Regulatory approval came through this morning. We'll have 15 employees in the Asia-Pacific office by next quarter. Marcus settled into the chair beside Elena's. no longer adversaries, but partners who'd learned to leverage their different strengths. The transformation hadn't been immediate or comfortable. Marcus had required 6 months to accept that Elena's analytical capabilities complemented rather than threatened his relationship management skills. Elena had needed equal time to trust that Marcus could evolve beyond the entitled prejudices that had defined their original conflict. But the results spoke louder than personal history. Whitfield Richardson Strategic now managed $4.2 billion in assets, employed 127 people across 4 offices, and maintained client retention rates that made competitors study their operational methods. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Catherine Richardson. Board meeting moved to 3 p.m. Come prepared to discuss the European expansion proposal. Richardson Strategic Holdings had grown alongside its subsidiary, acquiring 6 additional companies and establishing Catherine as one of the finance industry's most influential power brokers. Elena's success at Whitfield Richardson had earned her partnership status and board responsibilities that extended far beyond her original role. More importantly, it had earned her something that money couldn't purchase: respect based on results rather than connections. The conference room door opened, admitting Jennifer Martinez, Elena's former Columbia classmate who now served as Whitfield Richardson's chief operating officer after relocating from Denver 2 years ago. "Elena, the Times reporter is here for your 2 p.m. interview," Jennifer announced. "She's particularly interested in discussing your mentorship program." Elena nodded, gathering her thoughts about the initiative that had become her most personal project: identifying brilliant analysts from non-traditional backgrounds and providing them with opportunities that mainstream firms overlooked. 15 protégés now worked at major investment banks, carrying skills and perspectives that their privileged colleagues couldn't replicate. As she prepared for the interview, Elena reflected on the journey that had transformed professional destruction into industry influence. The woman who'd once researched correct fork usage for charity galas now hosted those galas, using them to raise funding for financial literacy programs in underserved communities. The reporter proved insightful, asking questions that moved beyond surface-level success stories to explore the systemic changes Elena had helped orchestrate across Wall Street's traditionally insular culture. "What advice would you give to young women facing similar obstacles?" the reporter asked as their conversation concluded. Elena considered the question seriously. "Master your craft so thoroughly that competence becomes undeniable. Develop patience that outlasts prejudice. And remember that the people who underestimate you often provide the greatest opportunities. They just don't realize they're handing you the keys to their kingdom." That evening, Elena worked late in her corner office, reviewing acquisition proposals for Richardson Strategic's next board meeting. Through her windows, Manhattan's financial district sparkled with the ambitions of thousands of professionals pursuing their own versions of success. Her reflection in the glass showed someone she barely recognized from 5 years ago: confident without arrogance, powerful without cruelty, and surrounded by the kind of influence that transcended any individual relationship or social connection. Elena's phone displayed 17 missed calls from headhunters, 3 interview requests from financial media, and an email from the Treasury Department seeking her input on proposed banking regulations. She ignored them all and opened her laptop to review tomorrow's schedule: client meetings, staff development sessions, and a video conference with the Singapore office where her team was negotiating a deal that would cement Whitfield Richardson's position as a global strategic partner. At 9:47 p.m., exactly 5 years after acquiring Marcus's debt, Elena finally closed her laptop and prepared to leave the office. The building's lobby had emptied hours ago, leaving only security guards and cleaning crews who nodded respectfully as she passed. On the sidewalk outside, Elena paused to study the building directory beside the entrance. Whitfield Richardson Strategic, floors 23 to 27, appeared in elegant gold lettering, representing not just office space but proof that intelligence, determination, and strategic patience could reshape industries that seemed permanently fixed. Her driver waited beside a black sedan, but Elena dismissed him with a wave. The evening was warm, and she wanted to walk, to move through the city that had once seemed designed to exclude her, now carrying the kind of power that opened doors she'd never known existed. As Elena walked toward the subway station, her phone buzzed with one final message of the day. A text from an encrypted number. Your anonymous blog from 2021 changed my career. I just started my own consulting firm using strategies I learned from distressed dynamics. Thank you for proving that outsiders can rewrite the rules. A grateful reader. Elena smiled and deleted the message, maintaining the anonymity that had launched her resurrection. Some secrets were worth preserving, not for protection but for the satisfaction of knowing that influence could grow in directions that nobody anticipated. The train home carried her through boroughs where dreams were cultivated in studio apartments and local libraries, past windows where future analysts were probably studying for business school admissions tests, unaware that the industry they sought to enter had already been transformed by someone who'd started exactly where they were now. Elena closed her eyes and listened to the subway's rhythm, carrying her toward a future that continued expanding in ways that pedigree and social connections could never have imagined. Some relationships definitely didn't scale, but some transformed into empires that redefined entire industries. And sometimes, the woman they underestimated became the woman who changed everything. This story proves that your greatest setback can become your greatest comeback, but only if you have the strategic patience to play the long game. Elena didn't just get revenge. She rebuilt the entire system that tried to exclude her. She turned debt acquisition into empire building. She transformed professional humiliation into industry leadership. The lesson? When someone cuts you off thinking you'll disappear, that's when you disappear into the shadows and return as the person who controls their fate. Elena mastered skills that pedigree could never buy: financial precision, strategic thinking, and the patience to execute plans that take years to unfold. Crown, if this story of ultimate financial revenge inspired you, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell, because success stories this strategic don't happen every day. Briefcase, share this with anyone who's ever been underestimated in corporate America. Sometimes the best response to "you don't fit" is to become the person who decides who fits. Which part hit hardest? Elena's debt acquisition? Her mentor's guidance? Or that final boardroom moment when Marcus realized she owned everything? Drop your thoughts below. Backhand index pointing down.